Hi there, Jane and Paul.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me this morning. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your involvement with the creative arts?
I'm Paul Hyde, and I've been involved in the arts for a very long time. I came up to Middlesbrough as the first community arts worker for the town back in the 1980s, and did quite a lot with community arts. Then went in to do lots of other things, and have just gone full circle and gone back into doing art stuff with Whippet Up.
And I'm Jane Cuthbert, and I seem to have just been doing community arts in all kinds of different guises, including working for the Sage Gateshead with their music programme and young people. And then I took a huge leap of faith and decided I'd do a lot more work with older people. So I've been doing creative age at MEMA, and then set up Whippet Up with the whole idea of looking at how we can support people who were isolated, who were vulnerable, who could be supported through creativity to make a difference.
Brilliant. So
how Whippet Up came into being.
Can you sort of give some people an idea of what Whippet Up is, kind of projects that you've worked on, who you work with, how you find people to work with?
Yeah, so Whippet Up, it started in 2018, so it's a really simple philosophy. It's using art as a way of working with people, and initially I suppose we started off with being another of those organisations that uses art to work with people, but we quickly developed a twist to that, in as much as we run art and creativity workshops, and people refer in from mental health, from dementia support, so we have open groups of people that we meet with, or we used to meet with. We now meet with them on Zoom, of course. And initially it was about wellbeing workshops using art and creativity, but very quickly we started to involve all those workshops in actually delivering arts commissions. And there was two consequences to that. One is it gave a real focus. It's that thing where people start to get immersed in the creativity, immersed in designing, developing, performing at community events, and so it was a really positive thing, and it had its own momentum. The other consequence is that we're knackered. We've just been taking stock, and we've realised alongside our regular workshops, which run 3 days a week, we've delivered an arts commission with people once every 17 days since we started off. So it's a really exciting programme, but it's taking a lot out of the people who are helping us deliver it. And it's like everything else. We need a bit more resources to spread that out across more artists and keep it going.
But it's very exciting. The other I forgot to mention as well is I also I do street performance as well, which is I've also brought that in because I'm a tea lady, or I was a tea lady up until lockdown. Of course, that we can't do that anymore. But I used to tour around the country with a trike and a tea set and performance. It was great fun. But that element of performance is what we've brought into some of the workshops. So we have done a lot of parades when we were able to, and what was wonderful was having our whole groups being Vikings. We did a project called Mission Out of Control, which was a reimagining of the lunar landing, and we built a lunar module, a rocket, a massive 22
which were like garden.
And so it's always been how big can we go, really? How big can we go? How big and how far can we go? And then, of course, as I say, we've also been doing science days. So the whole idea of involving lots of people in science, like understanding how science works. So it's been crossing over with art and science. And the other one is we've also been running for 2 years an under fives program at looking at how you can instill creativity with parents and under fives, because actually under fives tend to lead it, and we're about to release our first book called Yeah, Let's Do That, which is all about getting under fives creative with whatever they can find in the house.
That's a really interesting idea, the idea that you can kind of use little kids to engage their parents in the creative arts, because I think for some people there's a barrier because of what they think arts is or what arts does, and kind of if you can engage them on level of, well, it's for the good of your children, for you to be involved, that I think that's tremendous. What would help you not have to do so much, not be so knackered all the time? What is it that would help to support what you do? Is it just more money? Do you need to get more people, or is that kind of the same thing?
I think it's moving towards that old world of sustainability. We pre-lockdown we were doing pre-first lockdown we were doing quite a lot of work with commissioners, because we have got recognised in the public health, mental health, NHS field, and we've done presentations at health and wellbeing boards. We've done provocations at national arts and health events. So we really believe that we've got a model that's very, very interesting. That whole thing about changing people's focus, so that when people are referred into us, they'll generally be really immersed in their own poor health or poor well-being. And what we try and do, and what we're sort of proving that we're doing, is immersing them in something different. We're immersing them in the community through arts, so that we're getting people to invent arts projects. We're getting people to, as groups of people, to respond to arts commissions. And I'm probably not actually answering the question, which is what do we need? And I think we need some way of going from just being grant funded over a year to do that, and then another year, and then 6 months, and then 3 months, and then
but also
and it's a bit of a trade, but that's been great. The grant funding has been great because it's helped us prove our models, and it's helped us develop our methodology so that we actually know what we're doing. We've gathered a good, strong evidence base. We believe make the argument in terms of how this fits in things like social prescribing, when people who will rock up at their doctors and say, I've got a bad back, and when there's no medical solution to that, then perhaps the solution lies in communities and in creativity. And so that's what we're trying to push, and that's if you like, what will ultimately mean that the thing is sustainable and becomes part of the mix.
And we'd love, our sessions used to be held in, we used to hold one in Boosbeck, one in Redcar, and one in Saltburn, and they were all very, very different, but it was all about communities coming together and supporting each other. And I do think that's what we desperately are going to need when we eventually sneak tiptoeing out. As I say, our sessions have continued, and we have continued. In the first lockdown, we just switched everything online straight away, not really knowing what Zoom was, and we've worked it out. It's worked out. We've worked out how to run sessions online and still maintain a level of support to people. So we've experimented with other things, like we do our virtual pub on a Saturday, which is a really easy way in, so that there might be a bit of a sing, there might be a bit of a quiz, there might be a bit of a game. There's usually one of us messing about with something or other. And it's that trying to hold communities together, which I think is desperately important.
Absolutely. one thing I hope is, if we do go back to being able to put on events and workshops and everything like we used to do, that we remember how valuable this kind of interaction has been to people, and particularly for people that have accessibility issues or have mental health issues that mean that, or just, you know, geographically remote, that rely on a bus service that, you know, barely exists. How we continue to involve those kinds of people. And coming back to, I mean, so many people involved in the arts spend so much of their time just filling in grant applications. It's like they barely got time to dust yourself down and congratulate yourselves on a job really well done, because then you've got to think about where the next bit of money's coming from, and a bit more long-term support, I think, is really, really important. And it's actually quite good to see that the Arts Council seem to have completely switched track and realised that community arts is probably the most important thing that they can provide money for. And so I spent 15 years working for Big Pharma, and I think that we need something like the pharmacoeconomic analysis that you used to do when you brought a drug to market, to show the cost benefit of that. I know it's horrific to think about art,
Well,
but I mean, not only is it under recognised how much art contributes to the economy and the 2 million people involved in it, but the amount of money that mental health services, for example, are saved because of the existence of things like Whippet Up. And that money just isn't factored in, and it really, really needs to be, because if you weren't doing this and all the other people weren't doing this community, then these people would be breaking down, you know, and they would be drawing from traditional, or what seemed to be. Now, I guess what I really want to say is that the arts is one of the biggest mental health services that we have in this country, and it needs to be recognised, and it needs to be given the money to do what it needs to do. You know, it'd just be great if you guys just had a wad of cash. You've proved yourself. You know what you're doing. You know, just give them the money and let them get on with it.
Yeah.
Look at his...
Can I just come back on something you said? Because I hope we don't go down the social return on investment route of trying to put a monetary value on everything, because it becomes then just something that's added into people's mix within the arts delivery, and it becomes too easy to claim that you're actually having a positive impact on well-being. One of the things that we're working with the university at the moment on looking at some new measures, because we don't want to. Within Whippet Up, we get loads of people that have had a life of being asked to do ticky boxes in terms of how badly they're feeling, and people don't want that. They don't want to be continually assessed about how shit their life is. And some of the work that we're doing with the university at the moment is looking at how you measure art changing the focus for people. So it's about how being immersed in art, that whole thing about, you know, when you're doing something and you don't even know what time it is anymore, or, you know, what day it is, what year it is, because you're completely like focused on it. You're gonna put this thing on, and it's going to be great, and it's going to happen. And for the first time in your life, you're involved in that. And what we're trying to do is work at ways of measuring that, measuring different impacts that the arts can have on people. Because I think there's real dangers at the moment in terms of embracing the old clinical well-being models within the arts. And I think if that happens, we're on a slippery slope to dullness.
Yes, I mean, this is the first Arts Council funded project I've ever had, was because I worked with a theatre director called Ken Campbell, and he was so anti-funding. He was like, funded theatre, that's exactly what it is, funded! So yeah, he was a real big advocate of not getting any money, any funding, and therefore being completely at liberty to do art and create in your own way.
No, we want everybody's money to do what we do. And one of the interesting things about our model is that the commissions that we're picking up. So we've been funded in East Cleveland by the UK Antarctica Trust to do a piece of community arts work with people around understanding Antarctica better, which was just fabulous.
It was one of the nicest arts projects we did. It was just so joyous because people were getting so excited and going off and finding more information about things they didn't know and things that they hadn't realised, and such fun building something together. So we were all building this piece. We were so excited because we were going to take everybody on the train, dressed in Antarctic clothes, to an exhibition in Middlesbrough to kind of celebrate what we created together. So we got very, very, and then of course
on March the 23rd, that was going to be.
on March the 23rd. But it was, those, it was just lovely. I really feeling like it was really going somewhere. But since then it's been.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of brings us on to the lockdown question. How have you coped? Obviously, you've explained there it's had a big impact on your work. I know you've been running stuff via Zoom and it's not the same, but how do you feel? Are you making plans for coming out, or are you just continuing to plan for the circumstances we're in?
I think we're well aware that the groups we're working with are possibly the most vulnerable and the most isolated. Having said that, there's also people that are already beginning to get their injections, their vaccinations, and we always talk about being back together and having real groups again, and how much we value those. So the conversation often comes round to the fact that we really want to be back together physically, but it's like you daren't offer that until it's actually possible. So it's kind of allowing people to have that discussion, but at the same time going, let's not make plans for that period, but we know it's going to happen. But it's like, let's just take one step at a time, because I don't think we ever got caught out. I think we twigged quite early on that this was a long term for us because of the nature of our age, our groups, just knowing the groups that we work with. We're thinking, you can't rush these people back into spaces where they're going to be vulnerable.
And because we're working with public health, really early on in the lockdown, we were asked to. They asked us to look at the design of a project that was specifically about COVID. And at that time, at the beginning of the lockdown, everything was going to be fine by summer, And public health was saying, think over the next 18 months for this project, because this is how long it's going to last. And we just felt like the prophets of doom, passing that discussion on, which turned out to be quite a prophecy, of course. But we have done, as Jane said, we initially got Zoom completely wrong. For some reason, once we took our workshops online, we became Blue Peter or Bob Ross for a while. And so we started saying, and this is what you do, and then you get this and you fit that big in and look at that. And it was rubbish. And it took us a while to realise that. So what we have now are Zoom workshops where Zoom's running. And generally what you can hear is the snipping of scissors and in the background and stuff like that. And every now and again, people go, oh, look what I've made now. And so what we've been trying to do is keep the creativity rather than it being an instructional type. Instructional, is that right?
Yeah.
Instructions of what to do. It's about, here's some material. And we deliver materials to people as well, drive around and drop stuff off. But we've done loads in lockdown. We've moved. we've got a big base. We're in with Tees Valley Arts up in the Hub, and we've
done some performances.
We did some performances. We've done
wasn't
films.
Just us, which was a bit sad because you really wanted the rest of them all there. We did a Stitched Up, which was an exhibition around climate change, where we worked with different groups of people to create a piece in their own home around climate change using whatever fabrics they had in the house. And then we put an exhibition together. It was all shown on a teepee. So we have a teepee now that we can show an outdoor exhibition of pieces of work, basically. So I think that may well come back next year. We've suddenly thought actually the TP is very good because it can pop up really fast, and we can do things from it. And we also we made the Thrift mobile, which was for the Festival of Thrift, and toured it around. And it was an electric vehicle that we had to convert in 2 days into something spectacular to then go and visit villages, which was lovely. It was lovely to see people, but as I say, it's all, we have to be so careful about what you do, isn't it? Yeah. That's been.
This has been, it's been absolutely lovely to hear about your work. It's like really quite inspiring. Your approach is great, and the way that you're kind of rethinking things and perhaps putting templates in place of how things can work well in future. So that's really exciting, and I'm really glad you've been able to adapt. And I just look forward to meeting you out there in the at some point when we're all out and about again. It's really been a pleasure. Thanks ever so much for finding the time.
Can we ask you some questions now?
You can, if you like. I mean, I haven't. It's funny. I've done I've done so many of these interviews, but I haven't done one myself yet. One of my interviewers said, are you going to do one? But I just kind of think there's so much of me blithering on, talking to other people. I don't know if I need one.
So I just want Teesside Rising, lovely name. And what is that the name of just the project, or is that a?
Yeah, so this it came out of so as I say, I've been involved in the creative arts for like God, I don't 30 or more years. Originally I was like into like indie music, and I did my own fanzine and stuff like that, and then
was that in Teesside? Was that in Teesside?
No, that was in Grimsby.
Right.
I moved down to London when I was 20 and spent sort of, 15 years there, putting on music clubs, and then accidentally got involved with the theatre, got involved with this 24-hour-long play, doing like a little bit of acting, but like sound effects and behind the scenes stuff, and the programmes and the flyers and the PR and all of that. And just kind of, I've always had that kind of collaborator, coordinator, encouraging others kind of role, and put my own creativity to one side, really, for just being helpful, really, and doing what needed to be done. And I did quite a bit of writing myself. I did like the morning pages and stuff. But then we moved up here 14 years ago when I was pregnant. So I did nothing. I fell into an utter creative abyss for sort of 5-6 years while I had a couple of kids. And then we moved up here because my old boss, he became like a friend, and then like my dad, and we moved up to look after him in his dotage. And he sadly died of prostate, bowel and lung cancer. And I nursed him to the end at home, which was a real honour and quite tricky. But it was my own dad wasn't really bothered about me doing anything but finding a job to pay the mortgage that he didn't really pay. But my new kind of dad always wanted me to go to university, and I didn't even know that I could. But it turns out I could, and I went to Tees University. So I didn't do A levels or anything, but because I'm mature, and I'm riddled with debt now. But the funding did allow me to actually go there, and so I did a BA in creative writing and English literature. And whilst there, the kind of head of English asked me to revive Teesside Literary Society, which had
all right,
ceased to function. And that was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we set up, we had weekly meetings where it wasn't just writers, and also it's open to everybody, current students, past students, people who wanted to go there, people that were just interested in writing. We had historians turn up, like archaeologists, all kinds of people, and just managed to create a really welcoming, friendly atmosphere where no one felt intimidated. There were a lot of people that turned up at first saying like, I'll come along, but I'm not going to do anything. And like after a few weeks, they were reading poetry and stuff that was like really deep and personal and meaningful. And I was really proud of that environment we created. And I also put together an anthology of the writing of 40 of us, like short stories, poetry, that kind of thing, and had it printed properly and published. And we made the money back within the first week through sales. And yeah, it was just absolutely brilliant. And we won. We were nominated for New Society of the Year, and then I saw the nominations and we weren't on it, and they'd kind of moved us out of New Society of the Year to Society of the Year, and we won that within 6 months of forming. But then I stayed on to do my MA in creative writing, and just thought running the literary society was too much on top of that, and I handed it over, and it was kind of turned into a corporate, like what you have on your CV kind of thing, and I was really upset. But you know, that is what it is, as they say.
Sometimes it happens, doesn't it? It's just that they get, you know, that you have that wonderful rush of wonderfulness, and it's how you and I think I wonder what will happen to us, whether they'll be, because we've had a kind of meteoric shoot up into and I suppose it's always the same, isn't it? It's like
they are fragile.
They're very fragile, and it's only as long as the energy of the people that are driving it have before.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of fell. So then in 2019, I went back to doing what I used to do and started this multimedia cabaret club. Bought a cheap projector so that the filmmakers and the animators could be involved, and basically created the same kind of atmosphere but in a micro pub in Stockton. And that ran really successfully for about 8 months, and then I had a hiatus with the idea of, because I couldn't pay anyone, you know, and I don't like putting on stuff without paying people. So it came back last February. I had dates booked for the whole year for like Basecamp and Disgraceland and the studio in Hartlepool, and it was great. Our first night was a real success. I got to pay everybody, and then lockdown hit, so that kind of blew it apart a bit. But I was interviewed by Steve Blank about what I was doing, and he did a short article, and then I saw this artist residency idea come up from it was like Tees Valley Screen in the Orcs last year, and I just thought, I'd had one poem commissioned by Apple and Snakes at the Arc, and I'd been like, oh, maybe having money to do art isn't so bad. So I thought, do you know what, I'm going to put in for this residency. And that was when I originally came up with the idea of doing these interviews that were for that part of the project, transcribed and analysed by a local AI. And then that was part of Middlesbrough Art Weekend. We had an art installation at the old Thomas Cook unit on Captain Cook Square, and it was brilliant for engagement, because even when I was just like hoovering and tidying the place up, got loads of people coming in like, what's going on here? And had this great guy Elvis came to both days of my exhibition. So that was really the start of it all. And then when lockdown happened, I kind of thought that this would be a brilliant project to revive. So it was where I think the name Teesside Rising just came in just before the actual art weekend, and so it's kind of become an entity of its own. And I mean, we're at the end, pretty much at the end of the 200 interviews. It's been 6 months. It's been a trail of up and down, of lockdown, in and out. but has just been a real joy. And I know that there's at least another 200 people that I could carry on an interview. And it's been great to have a team of interviewers, because they've brought in people that I wouldn't know directly. And, you know, the calls out that we've done in social media, the amount of people that I've discovered, it's just been absolutely mind-blowing. It's been really exhilarating.
You have to edit it into something.
We're gonna have, I think, not much short of 100 hours of footage. All the interviews are supposed to be 10 minutes long. I don't think hardly any of them have stuck to that. I know, yeah, here we are. But I you know, I honestly don't care. It's just been absolutely wonderful. I mean, one thing that's really taking a long time is the transcripts, because the AI that transcribes them, maybe about 80% there, local accents, you know, Zoom cutout, all that kind of thing. So that's going to take a hell of a long time. But I'm, when I started at my club, the Red Room, a deaf poet called Cole Metcalf came along. So we've been on a real journey together to do with accessibility. So, you know, the big sticking point on this project is that I'm refusing to put anything up online without having properly done subtitles. So for 100 hours worth of interviews, that's quite a big task. Yeah. But
that's incredible. That's absolutely, well, I wish you every success with this, because I think it's a brilliant thing. And if anything we can do to help support, as I say, we just we bash on over in Redcar, Cleveland, we cross into Middlesbrough. We don't tend to, even though I grew up in Stockton,
we've done the Riverside Festival.
Yeah, we do the Riverside Festival just for carnival stuff and things like that. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, one thing that I have got planned is, gosh, I mean, it might have to be a weekend, but I really want to do a big event at the auxiliary at the end of all this, where the all 200 interviewees contribute in some form, whether that's films, installations, art, performance, behind the scenes, you know, live bands on, just like starting off in the morning with sort of workshops and kind of educational kind of things, and then moving into performance and stuff for the afternoon, and then turning into a massive banging party by the evening. So that's,
if that happens, we would love to be involved. We have a cardboard based presentation.
we use a horrendous amount of cardboard. In fact, as you got contacted, we just received some cardboard boxes, and I was like, oh, let's just take these down and make them so I can use them, because cardboard is just genius for doing Zoom workshops.
right.
Everybody's got some.
Yeah, everybody's all we're using the cardboard. Yeah, when we presented at the Health and Wellbeing Board, they asked for a copy of our PowerPoint before our presentation, and we had to explain that we couldn't, because we were actually presenting using the medium of cardboard.
Brilliant. Awesome.
Inspired by Dylan, of course, with a
the paper, but actually cardboard.
Of course. Yeah. Awesome. It's been so lovely to meet you, and let's you know, we've got to raise glasses together when we're allowed, and in the meantime, just big respect for all that you do.
And you, absolutely, to you, and anything we can do, give us a nod.
Okay.
Shall we do this?